In the early days of the American Republic, a shadow plot unfolded that threatened to tear the young nation apart. At its center was a man whose name is now infamous, Vice President Burr. Fresh off his fatal duel with Alexander Hamilton, Burr didn't fade into obscurity as a villain. Instead, his ambition, now untethered and dangerous, spiraled into one of the most bizarre and audacious plots in American history, the Burr conspiracy. This wasn't just a small scheme. This was a plan so grand it threatened to fracture the young United States, pulling in President Thomas Jefferson, future President Andrew Jackson, and the nation's top general. It's a story of spies, secret codes, and a plot to build a brand new empire in the American West with Burr as its leader. So, what happens when one of the most powerful men in the country goes rogue? After the duel in 1804, Burr was a man without a future, or so it seemed. He was facing murder charges in New York and New Jersey, which were later dropped, and had destroyed his political career. But Burr wasn't one to accept defeat. His eyes turned westward to the vast, newly acquired Louisiana Territory. The exact details of Burr's plan remain a mystery, as he told different people different things to win their support. But historians believe his ultimate goal was to carve out a new, independent empire. The plan likely involved liberating Mexico by raising an army to invade Spanish-held territories, including modern-day Texas and Mexico, and establishing a new government there. It also involved encouraging the secession of the West, convincing western states and territories like Ohio, Kentucky, and Tennessee to break away from the United States and join his new country. Finally, it involved capturing the critical port city of New Orleans, which would give him control over the entire Mississippi River trade. Some accounts even claim he planned to march on Washington, D.C. and overthrow the U.S. government entirely, installing himself as an emperor or king. It was treason on an epic scale. To pull it off, he needed money, weapons, and powerful allies. Burr began quietly recruiting. He tried to get funding from the British and Spanish, who gave him a few $1,000s, but ultimately saw his plan as too risky. His real success came from finding powerful and dissatisfied figures within America itself. His most important accomplice was General James Wilkinson, the senior officer of the U.S. Army and the governor of the Louisiana Territory. The two had served together in the Revolution and communicated in secret coded letters. There was just one problem. Wilkinson was also a paid spy for Spain, a notorious double dealer whose loyalty was only to himself. Next, Burr needed a base of operations. He found one with Harmon Blennerhassett, a wealthy but naive Irish aristocrat who owned a luxurious private island on the Ohio River. Burr charmed Blennerhassett, convincing him to pour his fortune into the scheme. Blennerhassett's island became the headquarters for storing boats, supplies, and weapons for Burr's private army. He also gained the support of men like future President Andrew Jackson, then a major general in the Tennessee militia, by convincing them the plan was secretly approved by the government for a war against Spain. Burr was a master manipulator, telling each person exactly what they wanted to hear. By 1806, the whispers of Burr's plot grew too loud to ignore. Newspapers began printing articles about his activities. A federal attorney in Kentucky, Joseph Davies, even wrote directly to President Thomas Jefferson, warning him of a rebellion. At first, Jefferson dismissed the claims. The real downfall came from within. General Wilkinson, seeing that the plot was gaining too much attention and was likely doomed to fail, did what he did best. He betrayed everyone to save himself. Wilkinson sent one of Burr's own coded letters to President Jefferson, exposing the treasonous details. To confirm the story, Jefferson sent an agent to Blennerhassett's island. Believing the agent was one of them, Blennerhassett spilled the details of the plot. They raided the island, seizing the conspirators' boats and supplies. Burr, realizing he'd been betrayed, fled down the Mississippi with a small band of followers, hoping to escape. He was eventually captured in modern-day Alabama on February 19, 1807, and taken to Richmond, Virginia, to stand trial for treason. The trial of Burr was a clash of titans. On one side, you had a vengeful President Jefferson, who was obsessed with proving Burr's guilt and even told Congress his guilt was beyond question before the trial began. On the other, you had the formidable Chief Justice John Marshall, who presided over the case and was a staunch defender of the Constitution's limits on federal power. The prosecution's case, however, fell apart for two key reasons. First, their star witness. The main evidence was the letter from Wilkinson, but on the stand, Wilkinson admitted he had altered the letter to remove any parts that implicated himself. His credibility was shot. Second, the definition of treason. The U.S. Constitution has a very strict definition of treason. To be convicted, a person must have committed an overt act of war against the United States, and this act must be witnessed by at least 2 people. The prosecution couldn't produce 2 witnesses to a single overt act. Burr was planning something, yes, but he hadn't actually levied war. As Justice Marshall determined, plotting treason is not the same as committing it. On September 1st, 1807, Aaron Burr was acquitted of all charges. Though legally innocent, Burr was ruined in the court of public opinion. He spent several years in exile in Europe, disgraced and broke. He eventually returned to New York, where tragedy struck again when his beloved daughter, Theodosia, was lost at sea. Burr lived the rest of his life in relative obscurity, a shadow of his former self. But his story has one final, poetic twist. In his old age, he married a wealthy widow, Eliza Jumel, who quickly discovered he was squandering her fortune on bad investments. She filed for divorce. And the lawyer she hired to represent her? None other than Alexander Hamilton Jr., the son of the man Burr had killed 3 decades earlier. The divorce was finalized on September 14, 1836, the very day Aaron Burr died. We may never know what Burr was truly after, whether he was a revolutionary, a traitor, or just a tragic figure of ambition. But his story proves that sometimes American history is stranger and more thrilling than any fiction. If you enjoyed this dive into one of history's greatest political dramas, make sure to subscribe to the Compass Reports. Thanks for watching,